レッドアイズブラックドラゴン。デュエルモンスターズの中でもブルーアイズホワイトドラゴンと並ぶ伝説のレアカードだよ。
Yeah, but you can't make a Red Eyes Black Dragon guitar look this good. Before we begin on the main series and these periodic reviews, there's one other piece of material left to address. The Yugioh movie. No, not that one. And I don't mean Dark Side of Dimensions either. In 1999, as the Toei Yugioh series wound down, they produced a 30-minute anime film for the series that served as one half to one of Toei's usual double features, and once more focuses on the card game that, by this point, had begun to regularly be released via Konami. To be specific, the Konami run of the card game had begun to be released the week before this film premiered, and served to significantly boost sales, especially as those who attended the movie received a special promotional box with first-run print cards, a deck box, life point calculator, and Duelist Kingdom starships. Goddamn Japan and their cinema promotions. The movie was written by Yasuko Kobayashi, and thus has a bunch of her tropes involved in things. Specifically, the movie revolving around someone that actually does not really matter to the story, how ridiculously melodramatic it is, dialogue repetition, it hits her marks. However, this movie does give us one of the longest-lasting descriptors for the two most prominent Eyes dragons of the franchise. The Blue Eyes White Dragon is the beast that brings victory. If you've seen my dual networking Let's Plays, you know how true that is. But the Red Eyes Black Dragon is the beast that brings potential, and it's ultimately up to that wielder to decide how to accomplish their goal. And this has been reflected heavily in the card game, it taking forever for the Blue Eyes Dragons to evolve into a full archetype, whereas the Red Eyes Black Dragon has gotten tons of support even from the earliest days of the game. Be it from metamorphing it into the Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon, fusing it into 2, now 3, fusion monsters, effect damage with Inferno Fire Blast, simple searching and then summoning with Black Chick, or Graveyard Revival with Wyvern, to say nothing about how much easier Red Eyes Darkness Dragon or Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon are to summon than Blue Eyes Shining Dragon, or the much newer support we've gotten for it since Arc 5 sets have been regularly coming out with new things for all of the oldest and most beloved cards from the early days. Which is a lot of love for a monster that, ultimately with respect to the game, on its own has subpar stats. The unwritten rule for one-tribute monsters in order to break even when summoning them is to have 2,000 attack, 2,500 defense, or a superior effect. That stat prerequisite goes up another 500 points every 2 levels, and whether an effect is good enough to use it becomes a bigger concern. And for a level 7 monster to have its stats beaten by a level 6 released before it, it was a rarity it saw play in more battle-aligned decks until the archetype formed in the GX years. And when it did, it was usually in decks that stylized themselves around Jinochi Katsuya, but the love and prominence for it really saw its first light with this movie. Hell, this movie makes a lot more coherent introduction to the card game than any episode involving it in the original series, though it would not serve as the best introduction, which is still the Duelist Kingdom arc. But it probably helped that at that time, Red Eyes was one of the most prominent powerful cards. The Dark Magician wasn't introduced in the anime, nor had Trihorn Dragon or any of the things that outstatted it, so the green-haired kid that the film revolves around, the spineless Shogo Aoyama, is introduced as getting the card while wanting to be just able to win and growing into a great player of the game, but then feeling ostracized on how now he'd win too easily. The idea being he would have wanted a better give and take, to not win all the time, but likewise not be an all-time loser, as losing all the time hurts. And he's lost so much, he's paralyzed by fear of losing. Still, it's arrogant to be like that, as the card game, even from the beginning, didn't ensure your victory from one overpowered card, but how it was used in games. The deck is made up of a minimum of 40 cards after all. 20 if you're using the recently revised speed duel rules. So it was possible back then to lose before you would even get the card that would turn things in your favor. Which actually plays a bit into Shogo's fear of loss, as even if he has that great card, if he still loses with it, then doesn't that mean he's worthless at something he enjoys? But it still is ridiculous to be paralyzed in fear,
at the idea of playing a game.
Ah! What? Clowns frighten me.
Still, as this is a Toei movie, Seto Kaiba is lacking any of his later showcased character intricacies and is an outright villain, setting up surveillance schemes around Yugi in order to plan out his desire for a rematch to regain his pride. At the very least, the depiction here is more human, denoted by how his colorization more matches the brown hair and blue eyes expected of him.
Along with his history of wearing ridiculously long coats that inexplicably flutter around him even when there is no breeze.
This is the first appearance in anime form of the Ante-Rule, a banned principle where one bets their cards on the outcome of a duel. Seto setting up a tournament using it in order to amass rare cards with which to face Yugi with, since his blue eyes aren't enough. Along with the invitations, he orders his goon squad to force the invitation to select members, including Shogo, not allowing any of them to be absent.
Which it turns out is really, really stupid, as before that part of this plot, he would have gotten Yugi to easily play him.
Hell, Seto isn't shown actually taking any of the cards from people he duels one after the other. He would have had this rematch with Yugi without any of the theatrics by just hosting and inviting him, which he did. Thus, there's no reason for the antagonism in the film to exist.
I mean, say what you will of the 4Kids funded film, at least the actual antagonist of it played off of Seto's existing desire for a rematch to facilitate his own plan. Seto wasn't made the villain of it just because he's the rival with an exorbitant amount of disposable income.
Screw the rules, I have money.
This is a recurring problem with Kobayashi's antagonists across... It pops up with someone in pretty much all of her works. Their actions and malevolent schemes are not supported nor validated by their supposed motivations. While such can make them relatable and human to an extent, it does not excuse when they have another out which would have derailed the events of the story entirely.
Trying to escape leads to Yuki getting the puzzle swiped and the red eye stolen, an attempt to entice the pair into participation.
Take this!
Yet Jonochi runs after the assailant and tries to punch his lights out, only resulting in the recovery of the red eyes, Yuki going to face Seto to get the puzzle back, which is just handed over, showing fully how absolutely pointless the antagonistic plot point actually was. While the full Toei series first showed the solid vision holographic system, the manga had progressed far enough by this point that the film was able to show off some of the first elements of the early dual disc system, though lacking the spinning projectors. So just throwing the cards into the air to become holograms, which is just nonsensical. But as said, since the manga had progressed to the point where the card game was the focus, a lot of the series' memorable monsters begin to properly appear, making this a bit more engaging than the second series anime's first episode, as there's more strategy employed by both sides in this engagement, showing how Yasuko Kobayashi did her research for the series, inscribing her original story for it. Except when we get to how Seto teams up his dragons to combine their attacks. Yeah, the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon has been introduced by this point, the Wicked Chain card in essence acting as a poor man's reversion of it, though permitting simultaneous attacking. However, this game runs on Deus Ex Machina, and in a chance spilling of cards from earlier and a display of sleight-of-hand cleverness from Jonochi,
which you would not expect of him if you watched the 4Kids dub of the series, as there, they turned him into a fucking moron.
Yugi got the red eyes in his deck, thus allowing him to fuse it with his Meteor Dragon into the first and more powerful of the red eyes fusions, Meteor Black Dragon!
A card that over here took until it was, effectively unplayable to finally get released in 2012 by Konami, amongst a bunch of other delayed cards, despite it being some of the early sets of the OCG. What the hell was up with that upper deck?
Which ultimately acts as a lesson to Shogo to grow a spine and stop worrying about and determining outcomes to events that have not yet transpired. The future hasn't happened yet. It's up to you to shape how it turns out.
Though in this case we do know what happens when Seto Kaiba is the one who shapes it. The future! The only place where grown men can play children's card games on motorcycles! I made that in 2008.
Though again, playing against dub expectations, it's again Jonochi who, like his early series showcasing of wanting to toughen Yugi up so he wouldn't be preyed upon, is the one who teaches this lesson to Shogo, with a Tem used as the example to strive towards. Even though, had this been the real game, Meteor Black Dragon would have lost, as Seto's combination of Blue Eyes was statted at 4,500 versus Meteor Black Dragon's 3,500. But whatever, happy ending, as now Shogo's not afraid to connect to people through friendly card games. Not like he realistically should have been in the first place.
The Toei movie, it's goofy, but it's not bad.
Its main issue is how shallow the motivation is for the antagonism showcased. Seto, if you want to play Yugi again, just invite him to play a game. You ultimately get the same lesson at the end of the day without the open antagonism. Hell, it might have worked better had the kid chickened down to the game after a video showcasing Seto Kaiba's capability at it, becoming fearful of his vaunted goal by seeing what it takes to be among the top players, and Yugi with his cards showing that even if you start with little, you can still be the best like no one ever was, but he can't get there by not trying. I do stand by what I said in how it's a more dynamic and interesting introduction to the game than would be seen with Studio Gallop's first episode, even though they effectively follow to a point the bouts from the manga over there, which ultimately is better in the long run with how Duelist Kingdom stylized a step-by-step introduction to the card game's rules.
Meaning yes, next time I get around to one of these videos, I will finally be getting to the Studio Gallop anime adaptation of the series we all know and love. And how it's actually another check mark on the list of shows 4Kids bastardized in localization.